Welcome. I'm Rabbi Danny Nevins, Dean of the Rabbinical School at JTS, and I'm pleased to share words of Torah with you in celebration of Shavuot. We all know that Shavuot is a festival that's associated with the giving of Torah, Matan Torah, and that the evening of Shavuot, Erev Shavuot, has been dedicated for many centuries to the study of Torah. We have already in the Middle Ages a description of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his students, as told in the Zohar introduction on page 8, that they would study the night of Shavuot in order to help merit the receiving of the Torah and the combination, the marriage of the people of Israel and God, or perhaps different aspects of God as well, the aspect of Tiferet and the aspect of Malchut. We're going to open with words from the Song of Songs, which says, Ani Shena v'libi er, Kol Dodi Dofek. I was asleep, but my heart was awakened. The voice of my lover was knocking. This, in chapter 5, verse 2, is a beautiful description, a romantic description of a lover who is seeking the presence of her beloved. And although she's sleeping, she's restless. And so you could read this on the pshat level, on the surface level, as being simply about a person who's having trouble sleeping. However, it could also refer to different aspects of the self. For instance, you could say, Ani Ishena, I, my ego, my sense of self, was dormant, was sleeping, was resting, and my heart, which is a reference to a deeper part of my personality, was then awakened. In that sense, it's a bit like meditation, where you try to quiet the mind, to still your soul, so that other deeper feelings can emerge. And that perhaps is one hint of what we are capable of on Shavuot. We are trying to sort of step back from the daily routines and to enter into a more spiritual realm, a realm of contemplative prayer and of study, especially of study on Shavuot. We're going to be looking at some texts, and I'm going to try to make this a fairly expeditious stroll through these texts. So we're going to look first at this verse from Shir HaShirim. So I said it's chapter 5, verse 2. It begins with the word Ani, and Ani, of course, means I, and actually this opens a unit from chapter 5, verse 2 through verse 8. You've got a unit that's all about these two lovers who are trying to connect. And it ends with the words Ki cholat ahava ani, because I am lovesick. So the word Ani caps the beginning and end of this literary unit. And it also is an indicator that the I, the ego, the sense of self, is on the one hand what we have to offer, but on the other hand is also a bit of an obstacle when we're trying to encounter the other. Now in the Midrash, Midrash Shir HaShirim Rabbah, we have a description of the heart being opposed to the self in a variety of ways. It is trying to say that I am sleeping, meaning that I'm not accomplishing certain things, but my heart is awake, but I'm yearning to accomplish those things. And so the gap that's being encountered is between what one is capable of doing in physical reality and what is yearning to do in spiritual reality. So let's look. Amra Knesset Yisrael Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The people of Israel, let's translate it that way, said before God, Ribono shel olam, ani yeshena min hamitzvot. Master of the universe, I'm sleeping from commands. That is to say, I'm not fulfilling what I was supposed to do. V'libi er l'gemilut chasadim, and yet I'm filled with love. I want to be giving to others. Or, ani yeshena min hatzdakot. I am actually not accomplishing what I want in terms of righteous behavior in the world. V'libi er la'asotan, and yet my heart is desiring and is awakened to the need to do them. Ani yeshena min hakorbanot. Another way that I'm dormant is I'm not able to serve you with the korbanot, with the sacrifices. V'libi er l'kriyat shema v'tfilah. However, I am awake enough to do certain mitzvot which are in my hand, to say the Shema each morning and night, and to say the tefillot, the prayers. So you've got sort of an idealized service of God, which would include the sacrifices in the temple. And then you've got the realized version, which is where we're able to say the Shema and the Tefillah. But there is a tension between the two. Ani shena mi beit hamikdash v'libi er lebatei knesiot u'batei midrashot. And then she says, I am asleep in the sense that I can't go to the temple in Jerusalem, but I'm awake in that I can go to synagogue and to the study hall. Now, I'm feeling in this year of coronavirus that maybe ani shena b'batei knesiot u'batei midrashot. I myself am not able to go to synagogue or the study hall, but I'm awake to what? To Zoom, I suppose. I'm awake to the ability to connect to people in other ways. And so you've got, again, the ideal and the real. Ani yeshena min haketz v'libi er legeula. I'm asleep. I can't imagine how this all ends, but my heart is awakened to the possibility of redemption. Ani yeshena min hageula. I can't even imagine the redemption. V'libo shel hakadosh baruch hu er lega'aleni. However, I am connected to God, and God's heart is awake to redeem me. Now, with that little phrase, you've got a shift. Up until now, it's been all about me in my physical life being incapable of doing certain things, but me in my spiritual life being capable of doing some of them. And now, all of a sudden, it's saying that even if I can't do certain things, God can do them on my behalf. Because God apparently is my heart. Libi er, my heart is awake, means that God is awake to take care of me. Now, wait a second. How do we know that God is the heart? Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Echan Matzina Shenikra Kadosh Baruch Hu Liban Shel Yisrael. How do we know that the Holy One is called the heart of Israel? Min hadin kra dichtiv, tzur levavi v'chalki Elokim le'olam, because there's a verse in Psalm 73 that says, God is my rock, my heart, my portion forever. Now, I was talking about the pshat level, and then, which is the surface level, which is that the person is asleep, but they're dreaming perhaps, they are alert in some deeper sense. I then showed you midrash, midrash being a sense that, well, these two things could be referring to an active state and then a spiritual state, or they could be referring to me in relationship to God. Michael Fishbane has a wonderful commentary, the JPS commentary on the Song of Songs, and in it, he gives us a remez, a allegorical reading of this. He says, the seeker experiences a dual state of consciousness. The surface mind, ordinarily concerned with self and ego, was stilled, while on a deeper level of meditative awareness. The self has withdrawn from worldliness and cultivated a mindfulness of spiritual matters. Sleep symbolizes the quieting of consciousness, and wakefulness, the focalization on matters of ultimate concern. In the latter state, one hears with inner ear. And so we've got here a description that in a way, the ani, the ego, needs to be quieted down so that the heart, which is this deeper spiritual identity, can emerge. And again, we've got this meditative state, which is being described here. Maimonides, in his Guide for the Perplexed, in section 3, unit 51, towards the end of the guide, he says that in general in life, we are distracted. We have our ordinary interactions with people, business, even family interactions, and then there is the more refined spiritual part of us. And he says that if you can train yourself, then you could actually allow yourself to be connected to God even in those ordinary times. And he understands this to be the meaning of our verse from the Song of Songs. Then we have attained not only the height of ordinary prophets, but of Moses our teacher, of whom scripture relates, and Moses alone shall come near before the Lord. But as for thee, stand thou here by me. In other words, we are trying to aspire to be like Moses and to have a little bit of a detachment from the ordinary world and attachment to the Holy One. This is what mystics understand as being the passage from Nefesh, which is sort of our animated spirit, but very much in the world, to Ruach, which is already transcending a bit of ordinary experience, to Neshama, which is coming very close to the divine realm and very detached from the physical realm. And so perhaps that's what it could mean. Ani yeshena v'libi er. I am sleeping, but my heart is awakened. However, I'd like to now look at a couple of texts about how confusing it can be to be in this state of semi-consciousness. We've got a verse again in Psalms 73, verse 20, Kachalom mehakitz Adonai be'ir tzlama divzeh. And it's saying that when a person is dreaming and they waken, right, then sometimes what they were holding on to, maybe even if it felt precious, slips away. And the way that this verse is understood is that that's how some people are in this world. They look like they're real, but there's nothing of substance that will remain. They're like a dream that's going to pass. And this is, in fact, how Moses al-Sheikh, a mystical commentator on the Torah, understands it. He says, "Kechalom mehakitz, shu ki kasher yikra la'adam sheyach kecholem chalom behakitz." It's like a person who's in the middle of a dream when they waken. Shehi tardema kala, which is like a light type of sleep. Nim velo nim, tir velo tir, asleep but not asleep, awake but not awake. Umitdamelo devar kechezyon chalom, and he has this sort of image like the vision of a dream. Shehu ki'ish nidham, and it's confusing. It's like a person who is stunned. Kain yu anashim ha'ela hochim v'nidhamim al ragleim. So too are these people who are sort of sleepwalking through the world. And the goal is to become more alert, to become more grounded in the ultimate reality, not just the passing reality, in God. Now, Moses al-Sheikh used an expression here that may not be familiar to you. Nim velo nim, tir velo tir. Asleep, but not asleep. Awake, but not awake. That actually comes from the Talmud, and we're going to see from where in just a moment. There's certain mitzvot which you have to be awake for. Actually, most mitzvot you have to be awake for. So, for example, reading the Megillah. If the Megillah is being recited on your behalf, you can't doze off. You have to pay attention. Likewise, as you know, Passover was originally designed to be celebrated by taking the korban, the paschal lamb, and in the afternoon it would be sacrificed, and then it would be roasted in the evening and eaten during the evening. That was the Seder Shel Pesach. That was what you were supposed to do. What happens if in the course of all this roasting and the serving, you sort of dozed off? Could you still eat the Korban Pesach? After all, it's supposed to be done before midnight, and you're supposed to be awake according to the Torah. Well, in the Mishnah, in Tractate Pesachim 120b, Rabbi Yossi Omer, "It namnemu yochlu, nirdemu lo yochlu." He says that if people at one of these Passover Seders sort of dozed off, which can happen, and they wake up, then they can continue eating. But if they were full out asleep, then no, their night is done. They have to just go to sleep, and they can't eat any more of the sacrifice. Now, in the Talmud here, about Rabbi Yossi, the Stam wants to know, what does it mean to be dozing versus sleeping? Can you define these two terms, which are very similar? Amar Rav Ashi, nim velo nim, tir velo tir. What it means to say that you are dozing is that you are asleep, but not asleep, awake, but not awake. Kigon dekari leva ani. You're awake enough that if someone says to you, "Hey, Danny," you might respond, right? But velo yada lahadure svara, but you don't know how to speak properly. You're sort of in a bit of a stupor, right? So we've all been in that moment where you're kind of falling asleep. Someone sort of calls out to you. Your mind is conscious enough to be responsive, but not enough to really be creative and to be able to speak reasonably. Right, so you're sort of in this in-between state. The chimid karule midkar, but when people sort of remind him what happened, then he can remember it. Right, and Rashi translates the word tir as air. And so what is going on here is that according to the Gemara, there's an in-between state of being asleep and not asleep, where you can sort of be partially in conversation with the world around you and partially in your own dream state. Now, the Talmud has a lot to say about people waking up from dreams. If you look in the Talmud Tractate Brachot 56b, there's a whole section about dreams and the importance upon awakening from a dream to sort of interpret it in a positive way or find someone to interpret it for you, because the idea is that the interpretation guides the meaning of the dream. The dream on its own is fantastical, doesn't have its own meaning, but what you do with the dream does mean a lot. If you see a dog, for instance, in a dream, you can say a verse from the Torah, which is a positive verse, like no dog will bark at you, and before you say a negative verse, which would seal in the meaning. And the rabbis also have this idea that if you have bad dreams, that you shouldn't just ignore them. You need to do something about them in your waking state. So this example from Maimonides in the Code on fasts says that if you have nightmares, then the proper thing to do is to fast, and that will help get rid of the nightmares. And it's such a serious thing that even if your nightmare was on Friday night, let's say, then you might have to fast on Saturday in order to try to avoid the recurrence of the nightmare. Of course, you're not really supposed to fast on Shabbat, so then you're supposed to fast another day to make up for the sin of fasting on Shabbat. There are other ways to get rid of bad dreams. Sometimes people even have a beit din or a court. I once sat on one that sort of tried to scare away the dream that this poor woman was having, and we all said, this dream, stop torturing her. But even if that sounds absurd to you, the idea that your dreams should be taken seriously, that they're a portal into some deeper meaning, is something that was taken seriously by our sages. And so for the last text, I want to share with you a Kabbalistic text, which you cannot look up on your own because it's only in manuscript form. I got it from my friend and a colleague at JTS, Professor Eitan Fishbane, who's the son of Professor Michael Fishbane, who I quoted earlier. In his book, Light Before Dawn, he studies a lot of the writings of a Kabbalist named Isaac of Akko, Yitzhak de Min Akko, and one of his books was called Otsar Chaim. And in it, interestingly, he quotes a philosopher who we realize is not a Jewish philosopher. According to Eitan Fishbane, he's actually quoting Avicenna, the great Muslim philosopher and rationalist, also known as Ibn Sina. And Ibn Sina had told a story that sometimes when he's working at night, trying to work his way through a philosophical problem, he's getting sleepy, and so he drinks some wine. Surprising for a Muslim, but he drinks some wine to try to stay awake. But then if he falls asleep in the morning, the idea will come clearer to him. That gets changed a little bit here in this text of Rabbi Yitzhak de Min Akko. Shemati she'achad migdolei haruchniim min chochmei hamechkar shekasher yikshe lo davar shelo yuchal laholamo ulehakifo besichlo ya'amod v'yishteh yayin tov v'yishan b'machshevet sichlo al hadavar hahu ubenim v'lonim yaskilehu v'ya'amod v'yachtivehu. So he says, I've heard about this philosopher from one of the sages. Notice it's very respectful how he refers to this Muslim scholar, that when something was difficult for him, that he couldn't understand it and surround it, meaning that he couldn't really interrogate it fully with his seichel, with his wisdom, with his conscious mind, he would stand and drink some good wine and sleep, which is not quite what Ibn Sina actually did, but this is now Yitzhak's method. And he would sleep. And in his thinking about it overnight, right, benim v'lonim, when he was asleep but not yet asleep, yaskilehu, then he would truly understand it, v'yamod v'yachtivehu, and he would stand up in the morning and he would write it down. According to Fishbane, he, the scholar, would use this method of intentional sleep as a way of trying to mingle different states of consciousness, mingling the alert conscious mind with the unconscious mind, and in the connection between them, come to a deeper understanding. If this sounds familiar to you, perhaps from your readings of Freud and other psychologists, it's true. There is something that we are learning, our mind is doing when we are unconscious, and that we are trying to understand in our conscious state. I think that in this Erev Shavuot, this evening of Shavuot, when we are studying Torah late into the night, when we are tempting sleep, we are trying to hold off sleep, we realize that we will nevertheless be sleepy even as we study Torah. Is that a problem? Should we wait till we can be fully aware? Should we wait until the morning and only study Torah then? Apparently not. Apparently, there is something to that in-between state, that semi-conscious state, which is very spiritual. It's a little bit like what we read there from the Song of Songs. Ani yeshena v'libi er. Though I be asleep, my heart is awakened. As we go into Shavuot, and as we embrace the Torah, as we study in isolation, unfortunately, this year, we may nevertheless achieve a deep state of spirituality, of connection to a realm which is not part of our conscious life. We may feel a little like that Midrash said, I can't do some things, but I can do other. Ani yishena, I'm asleep and not able to be in synagogue, in the study hall, together with my friends, with my family, with my community. But libi but nevertheless, I'm awake. That assertion that we are not defined entirely by our circumstances, but that we are able to go deeper into the spiritual realm, even with, or perhaps because, we are not fully engaged in our ordinary circumstances, is a blessing that I hope we can embrace on this Shavuot of 5780. I wish you all a Chag Sameach.